Welcome to the podcast, Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. I'm so honored to have our guest, Gayle Alexander, for the interview. Gayle is a licensed professional counselor and approved clinical supervisor who specializes in working with adolescents, young adults, and families through a deep, person-centered, strength-based approach. With a background that spans biochemistry and human development, Gayle brings both science and compassion into the room, helping clients navigate mood management, executive functioning, body image, emotional regulation, and communication with clarity and care. But her work is also deeply personal. As a teen, Gayle grew up in a loving, yet highly controlled environment where mental health wasn't talked about and struggles were often met with silence or spiritual bypassing. Undiagnosed ADHD and anxiety showed up as depression and suicidal ideation while feeling different, disconnected, and unsure how to trust her own instincts shaped how she moved through the world. That experience is what led her into this work. Today, Gayle is committed to being the support she didn't have, helping teens find their voice, build self-trust, and develop the resilience to navigate life's hardest moments. Her belief is simple and powerful. When young people are truly seen, heard, and supported, they can learn not just to survive, but to lead themselves forward. You're listening to Today's Leaders, from Teens to Titans. Hi, I'm Lorraine Gayle, a teen leadership coach. I transitioned from teaching chemistry to coaching teens in leadership, helping them realize they can do hard things. We've often believed that leadership is an innate trait, but it's actually a skill that you build and improve. On this show, you'll meet today's leaders who share their teenage experiences, revealing how they developed confidence, direction, and the tools to become the leaders they are now. You'll discover how you or the teens in your life have the potential to become confident leaders, even if it doesn't seem possible. Thank you, Gayle, for showing up. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you, Lorraine. It's great to be here. And I love everything that you're doing. You're really just trying to support kids these days and kind of get these positive messages out. We so badly need them right now.
Oh, 100%, 100%. So let's go back. Can you go to teenage Gayle and share a little bit about what her life was like, what some of the experiences were, and how those experiences really shaped you into the person that we're talking with today?
Yeah, definitely. The intro was great because I knew I was loved. I had all the things that you needed, a wonderful home and a mom who was around and, clothes and food and all the things. But I lived in a very homogeneous sort of environment. Like I went to school with the same kids really from like elementary, middle school through high school. So there really wasn't a whole lot of experiences outside of what all of us were having. And my family was very religious. And so if you had sad feelings or anxious feelings or was curious about things that were outside of God, they were sort of shut down a little bit. And it was sort of like, pray it away. And for a lot of my family, that really worked, but it didn't work for me. And so I felt off. I thought when you are a child, you can't see that the adults around you might have flaws. So the way that you internalize that is that there's something wrong with you. And I certainly know my parents never intended for me to feel that way, right? But I did. I felt like there was something wrong with me. And I actually had suicidal ideation in middle school, and only my very best friend knew about it. You didn't talk about those things. And I also knew that if I did share it, I was probably going to just be dragged to church more. It wasn't what I was looking for. And, I was a pretty good student and, sort of did what I was supposed to do. But I think because my parents thought they were protecting me, I didn't learn how to think for myself. I didn't learn how to make mistakes. And I see this a little bit in today's parenting of They're so fearful that their kid is going to make a mistake that's going to affect their life. And again, we
Right.
love our babies. We want to help them. But what we've done is we've created anxiety because kids don't know how to trust their instincts. They don't know how to make decisions, and they don't know how to suffer with uncomfortable feelings and know that that's normal and okay. So, maybe the message for me was, oh, if you pray it away, you'll feel better. But I think sometimes the message today is, oh, don't ever have an anxious thought or feeling that means something is wrong. And I think that's been not a great message for teens, because what I'm helping them to learn is it's okay to feel anxious. Anxiety makes you study for that test or apologize to a friend or show up
Mm.
and be prepared. Actually, they've done some studies that sadness is kind of linked to problem solving. And obviously, that's very different than like pervasive, like severe mental depression or real clinical anxiety. We get that there's some differences of those, and I am not minimizing people who are really struggling. And I do see in my therapy practice a much higher level of anxiety, depression, and self-harm than I think I've ever seen before. And I've been doing this for 20 plus years. So that's a real interesting thing. And I think we'll come back to that later. But for me personally, again, while I knew I was loved, I didn't have a voice. And I
Mm.
think that is so isolating for a child. Kids need to learn industry. They need to know what they're good at, and they need to be able to be an expert at something. And you need to be an expert at yourself, and you need to be okay to make a mistake. So that's kind of our message here at Project Safe, is that you're not broken. It's okay to make mistakes. That's part of the learning process. And I think that really did drive me into this career path of recognizing that I wanted to be a helper for people who need a safe space to do that, and that it's okay to not be okay, and that therapy is okay. It's a different generation. These kids will drive by the office and go, oh, my therapist is in there, versus I think 20 years ago, people didn't talk about going to therapy and didn't want anybody to know. There's a little bit more acceptance of it. But again, it's that acceptance of, oh, I have this disorder. And so that's the other thing, is getting away from, instead of it being a disordered piece of who you are, oh, these are feelings that we all have as human beings. We're going to get anxious if we have to take a test. We're going to be anxious if we have to talk to that person we have a crush on. We're going
Mhm.
to get sad if something doesn't go right, or if I get left out of a party. Like, that is a normal feeling, instead of everything having to be a diagnosis. So that's kind of what brought me to today.
Well, and before we dive into some of those questions, tell me what Project Safe is so that my audience can get a little bit even more understanding.
Yes, and SAFE actually stands for Strategies Aimed at Family Empowerment, because part of our goal here is to empower you to solve your own problems. I mean, sort of my job is to work myself out of a job, and some people really value therapy consistently long term. There is no shade in that at all. But I think really the goal is to say, like, hey, what's not working for you? Let's figure out how to help things get better, and let's move you forward. Move
Mm.
forward, make the changes that you need in your life, and then fly, be free, kind of a thing. And the other piece about that family empowerment piece was, instead of the teenager coming in as what we call the identified patient, oh, this is my kid who's not functioning well, we sort of look at it as more of a systems approach. What's not working in the school system? What's not working in the family system, or in your
Mhm.
friend group, your family of choice, right? Because it takes the stigma out of something's wrong with me. And
Yeah.
Oprah actually wrote a book that I think is so great, that instead of asking what's wrong with me, the question is, what happened to me? And that takes it into a broader level of, there's nothing wrong with me. Something happened to me and I'm struggling. And so I think that family system approach of recognizing that we're empowering you to solve problems makes it okay to not be okay, and makes it okay to recognize that we are in systems. We have to live with others. We have to communicate with our family, our friends, and our school systems. And when you feel isolated, you don't do that. And that's where some of the dysfunction shows up. So we really try to take the stigma out of that and give them solutions to move forward on their own.
I love that. I really do love the acknowledgement is that we don't operate in isolation. We don't operate in a silo, but so often all we see and feel and think is the silo of self, right?
Yes.
And really, as teenagers, that is when all
Yeah.
that exists really is self. And it really is interesting for me in reflection is that self only awareness and problems means a lot of times the deduction is I am wrong, I am bad, I am the problem, when in reality, there are so many factors and so many variables that are creating what is happening to you
You were so right, Lorraine. And the other thing with Project Safe is that we run therapy groups. And a lot of times kids are like, oh, I don't want to go to a group. I don't want to share any of my stuff. But if I can get them to show up, they actually really
Yes.
enjoy it because they recognize they aren't alone. They're not
Oh,
the only ones with these feelings. Oh, we both have the math teacher. I thought she just hated me. Apparently she's mean to you too. Or, oh, your parents take your phone at night. Oh, I thought that was just my dopey parents.
yeah.
And it makes such a powerful connection. And what we're also seeing is we're really having a loneliness epidemic at a time when we can be super connected, right? They can instantly talk to their friends and be online. But in some ways, it's made it much harder because there's this layer of, I got to project and mask who I'm supposed to be because, oh my gosh, it might get caught on camera or somebody could screenshot what I
Mm,
said. Or so there's this sort of hyper focus on, again, what's wrong with me rather than recognizing, oh, you know, we're all in this together. So that the group therapy piece, I think, is really insightful and helpful if I can get them to show up. They're a little hesitant because there's so much anxiety about being judged and so much anxiety about being wrong that they don't want to be weak in front of other people.
Yeah, I think there's so much. I agree. I tried to do group coaching
Yeah.
sessions. I had such a challenge getting them to show up together. But when there is a group of teenagers who are like realizing
Yes.
there's nothing more powerful than realizing they are not the only ones experiencing these challenges,
Yes.
it opens up this moment for them that is like cathartic, But you're also right is that there's so much fear that is preventing them from taking that step. And most of that fear is comparisonitis and the
Yes.
challenges that you and I as teenagers faced too, but we didn't see it all the time, right?
Right, so right about that. And I even run a young adult group. It's virtual because they're all in different places and
Mhm.
spaces. That and obviously we prefer in person, but hey, the virtual is this is where it's powerful and helpful,
Right.
like what we're doing today. But it's been really helpful for them again to recognize, oh, I'm not the only one feeling like this. And you just said it, like that comparison piece. Well, and what I've also said is they have a scarcity mindset.
Yes.
I'm never going to be successful. I'm never going to find a partner. I'm never going to get my degree or find a career. I'm never going to be able to afford to buy a house, right? So it's really
Right.
this scarcity mindset that keeps them really frozen in fear. And
Yeah.
then they don't take an action step. And there's such a power in just taking a tiny little action step to move you forward. And when you get stuck, then that's, I think, where a lot of the real trauma comes for these kids. They just feel like they're spiraling. It's
Yeah,
hard.
and there's the all or nothing
Yep.
mentality, right? So
Oh,
it's
definitely.
never, always. And I think, you mentioned just taking a little step, and there's so much fear around that little step because if that step doesn't go in the right direction, it means failure, right? And there's like this all or nothing decision. And, I think you and I are on the same direction and
Yeah.
trying to build that sense of resilience. And I, as a parent, can relate to what you were saying about wanting to protect my child, right? And so
Mhm.
we're all here doing what is the expert thing in our field, but we're making mistakes too. And so, as parents, we're afraid to acknowledge that we do things wrong. And so, we're putting up this rosy glass in front of all of our
Mhm.
peers online so that we don't look like we're making mistakes on our own. But that just sets us all up for this challenge of like recognizing that humanness.
Yes, humanness. And you also said another really important word is resiliency. And I think that's what's really lacking in the teens and young adults. And because they don't have that competency in themselves and that resiliency to, and so it's that piece that says, I'm allowed to fail.
Mhm.
Failure is how I learn. Or, if I bombed a test or didn't do well on a paper, well, that's because you're learning. That's called education. Instead, they expect to just nail it and get like perfect scores all the time. Well, that's not life. And then as parents, we are caught up in that same bubble of,
Mhm.
"Well, I don't want to make a mistake. Hey, I don't want to harm my child, right? Or also don't want to look like I'm making mistakes, but I think one of the greatest things that parents can do is acknowledge the mistake that they've made and apologize instead of it's not giving up your power to say, hey, hey, maybe mom overreacted on that. I was having a really bad day and we're going to redo this. Or even if, yeah, you know what, you're going to have a consequence because you did something, but you can come at it from a loving perspective of sort of like what was happening for you. All right, here's the consequence you still have to have. You still did something you weren't supposed to do,
Yeah.
but let's understand what was happening for you. And I think, again, parents are so worried about making a mistake that we're coming at it from anxiety. But what the kids see then is mom's anxious or mad or dad's frustrated and mad. So I must be doing something wrong. They can't see it
Mm.
that my parent is moving in anxiety or depression. So they internalize it that there's something wrong with them. And I think that is really where some nuggets can be made for parents trying to figure this thing called life and raising human beings, which is so difficult, is to acknowledge your humanness. You're still the parent, you still get to set rules and make decisions. And that's how that goes. My kid does not have to like me all the time. At the end of the day, you're going to love me for it. But it's okay to acknowledge your flaws and let the kids see that.
Well, and I don't think as parents and current educators, we had role models who did
Mhm.
that, right? And
Right.
so we are in this really new space where we
Yes.
are no longer the experts. We are no longer the holders of all knowledge, and nor were we ever, but we
Right.
definitely had more, right?
Yes.
And so when our kid comes to us and says, "I saw this," or "This is what I know,"
Mhm.
all of a sudden our knees are knocked out from underneath us and we're like,
Yes.
but wait, I don't know the answer to that question. And there
Yeah.
was no training in how to navigate not
Right.
having the answer because all of our role models
Yeah.
did or made us think they did.
No, that's really true, Lorraine, because kind of that motto was, I said so because I'm the parent. And again, don't get me wrong. There are times where it's like, this is the
Yeah.
answer because I'm the parent. That's how that's going to roll. But I think that was that old style parenting of just because you're a parent, anything you did was the law. And I think us as parents are more willing to look at, let's understand this, let's explore. But again, teachers were the experts and parents were the experts. And to the point where when we knew that wasn't the case. And then I think you've got a kid, you've got, parents, and you've got authority figures who are digging in saying, because I said so. And the kid's like,
Yes.
but I know that's not accurate. What
Right.
you just
Right.
did is taught the kid to not listen to their instincts.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
okay to have questions. It's okay to challenge things. It's okay to set boundaries, parents. And we need strong teacher role models, but we should be able to come forward with questions and ask and be inquisitive and allow communication to flow.
I have discussed this before about like it's right around that age of 16 where kids are making decisions of like, what does the rest of my life look like?
Yes.
What am I doing with the rest of my life? Where am I going? And they're getting all of this input of information from all these areas, which are, versions of experts and
Yes.
authority figures. And anything that a child might think or feel is super secondary. And so that I think is where the instinct starts getting pushed aside and not trusted and not listened to because any thought the teenager is having is not the value. It's what I want for you as my child, right? I, the parent, I didn't get these experiences. So I'm going to push them on you so you can have them because I really wished, but they're a different person,
That's right.
right?
Yeah, that is totally right. And again, I think it comes from the parent well meaning
Always.
protect the
Yes.
child and we think we know what is best. And look, again, we do have life
Right.
experience.
Right.
We do have some
Exactly.
advice and some guidance, but you want that child to be part of this process. And picking their whole life at 16, 17 is very daunting. And so many of them, so many of my college clients are like, I've made a mistake. I picked the wrong school. A lot of times they didn't. That's just the adjustment of you went from having really good friends in high school to not knowing anybody again. And you kind of had to start over. But there is this, again, because it's now so hard to get into college, there's this fervor around the application process and around the picking. And it's just become such a stressful environment that is so negative. Seriously wish that all kids could like have a year of like, you're not allowed to pick a major, just
Mm-hmm.
classes, but because it's so expensive, you really can't do that. That's just really
Right,
not.
right. And I think, I think there was comparisonitis when we were getting accepted into college, but it's not like it is today, right? There's bulletin boards, who's going where, and all of a sudden you feel inadequate, less than.
Yes.
And so much of that feeling is, like we've said a million times, super well intended, but the message is not being conveyed from the intent that it's being given. And I just, if we as adults stop to think about the impact that we're having on these teenagers that are really navigating a life that, I remember when I went to college, right? I had this idea of what I was going to do. And then 4 years later, that idea was kind of not relevant. And that was back in the 90s, right? Things are so much faster now. A kid in school for 4 years doing something, that something likely doesn't exist anymore when they get out of
Right.
college.
Yes.
And
Right. The field is changing so fast. You're absolutely right. And again,
Mhm.
we didn't have things weren't posted on socials all the time. And again, I am not
Right.
knocking them. There's some fun things about it, but I think now that we have more long-term data, we are definitely seeing the downsides, right? And the negative impact on mental health. And now laws are changing and coming into place. And I think so for parents of younger kids, they got a little bit of a leg up because they're going to be able to see this and go like, oh, I need to get control over that. Maybe the tide's going to shift that, hey, if nobody's allowed on the socials until you're, 12, 13, 14, 15, and that's the norm. Instead of, you're the one kid who wasn't on that when everybody else had those, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like no kid should have a smartphone,
Mhm.
at least maybe in high school, sure. Like I get they might need a phone, parents are working, sure, that makes sense, but they don't need a smartphone because to your point, then they have access to stuff that might not be accurate, might be more than they can tolerate and handle. And we want them to be kids for a while. Knowledge is power. There's no doubt about it. And I am not a book
Mhm.
gamer, like explore, learn, and know things. Absolutely. But there's a point in parents being able to monitor that at an age appropriateness that is still healthy for the kid to let the kid be a kid and go out and play and, do blocks and Legos and ride a bike and instead of, having their face in a phone as their developmental years, scroll by.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're already part of something bigger. You're part of my advocacy team. Leaders of Today and Peers Not Fears exist to amplify voices at the age when so many of us were having moments that shaped who we became, sometimes in silence, sometimes without support. These conversations are about what happens when voices are heard earlier, when leadership is named, and when young people are reminded that they matter. As we move from building these programs to sharing them more widely, my ask is simple. Help us carry these stories forward. Share an episode, talk about the work, pass it along to someone who works with youth, supports teens, or believes in the power of early leadership. Because when we normalize telling these stories and believing in young voices, we don't just change individual lives, we change what's possible.
Once again, like then we're seeing all their friends, like, Johnny applied to 12 colleges, and then it's like, well, I'm supposed to apply to 12 colleges. Not necessarily. I mean, I'm not saying
Right.
you couldn't, but just because Johnny did doesn't mean you have to. And
Right.
so you're right. Everything is super fast paced and super in their face and instant. It's the art of learning delayed gratification and tolerating uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to come back to that. I wrote that down as like that feeling of anxiety is normal. And we don't want that to go away because it protects us.
Yes.
Sometimes it holds us back, but it does cause us to have that moment of like, is this really what I want to do? Right.
Mhm.
And so I think about, as we were talking about phones, I was thinking about when we had to use a payphone. Right. And so it required us to think and problem solve and not have the answer right away. And
Right.
I find myself so uncomfortable when I can't get the answer to what my problem is right away.
Yes.
And that is my loss of that problem solving muscle that I used to have, that used to be so strong. And
Yes.
I look at my own teenage boys and I wonder, do they have any muscle of problem solving because they can solve and find an answer without
Mhm.
struggling through that
Right.
discomfort of not having it?
Absolutely. I did an experiment with myself a couple months ago where I said, all right, I'm purposely going to put my phone away for 2 hours. I didn't have, we had dinner and the whole thing. And I can't even tell you how many times like we were chatting and it'd be like, oh, let me look that up. And I'm like, oh, right. Oops, I don't have my phone in my hand. And
Yeah.
you and I weren't raised being with that ability. And again, knowledge is power. I love that we have that access.
Right.
But it has prevented us from being able to think through like, well, what could the answer be? And how
Mhm.
else might I figure this out rather than immediately searching it on the internet? Again, not knocking it, wonderful
No.
tool, but we would need to learn to explore. And so these kids have been fed information. And then again, when it doesn't come easy to them, they don't know what to do. They panic and then they internalize it. There's something wrong with me. And they
Me.
don't tolerate that discomfort. Go, no, there's nothing wrong with me. Anxiety is evolutionarily purposeful. It makes you pay attention. It makes you know what's happening. Again, different from like chronic debilitating anxiety. Let's be clear. There are people
Right.
who have real severe anxiety disorders. That is different. That's not what I'm talking about. But your average, like, I need to sit with some discomfort because it makes me problem solve. We're losing that skill and we need to gain it back. Because again, technology is here to stay. And, look, and it's rapidly expanding. So, AI and chat box and written essays for you, that's not where we want it to go. What we want it to go is, sort through data and give us good, accurate information. We love that. Certainly clean up my essay, sure. But we want to be able to do the skill ourselves. And because we get so uncomfortable with discomfort and failure, we don't want to do any of that.
Right.
That's the rub.
Right, right. And I think of like if I were to sit down right here with that blank space or that blank
Mhm.
page and that discomfort of having a blank page, I don't have to feel that anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm also not using my own thoughts, my own brain to generate the ideas that can then be enhanced, right? And
Yes.
so there's a combination of things that are challenging, right? And not one of them is the problem, and not all of them are the problem, but it's some
Right. It's
combination.
combo. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Right.
I think it's really valuable that, you're running sessions, and I love the idea that group sessions, I want that to become the norm for teenagers
Me too.
because there really isn't enough of them problem solving, and because they're not problem solving, they're isolated into thinking they're the only ones with these problems. There's no answer to their problems, and so they get caught in this spiral that
Yeah.
just exacerbates and creates more anxiety.
It does because then they're caught in that spiral of let me mask that everything is fine, but I don't think everything is fine. I feel like I'm failing, but I think everybody else is fine because they're all out there masking.
Right.
And that's
Right.
exactly the point. You get them together in a group where they can feel comfortable enough to start to really share. And they're like, oh my gosh. And again, it's not about maybe you would never hang out with that person and be a friend outside a group. That's fine. But you go, oh my gosh, I can connect on this level. I'm not the only one going through this. And then problem solving together as teens. You and I are both
Yes.
not in high school anymore. Having them
Yes.
help each other has great value as well because then they come out with a solution to their problem as well as they help somebody else. So it's a double win in that capacity and recognizing that these are all things we're all going through.
Yeah. Well, and so often the mask is something that I had this wonderful teenager who, when we were in COVID, I actually interviewed him on my podcast and he said, Miss Connell, we're all wearing masks. We've
Yeah.
all been wearing masks. In COVID, we just put actual masks on, and that like it stopped me in my tracks. And I, in that instant, realized, oh, I too am wearing a mask, right?
Yeah.
I was the mask of I'm the perfect teacher. I don't make mistakes. I can go from plan A to plan B, and my kids don't even know. But what I was communicating to them was that I didn't make mistakes. So if I
Right.
didn't make mistakes, they better not make mistakes. And I did the same thing with my own children, right? And so it's that realization that we've been striving so hard for perfectionism, and it's like holding the individual person back, but it's also communicating such terrible information to every other person around you that
Yes.
they can't make mistakes either.
Right. And if you're stuck in being perfect, you forget that sometimes good enough is okay. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean like you lackadaisical. It just means there is no perfect. If it's good, maybe good enough is okay and moving on. And I love what you just said because it's okay for adults to say, we were going to do this. But because of that, it's actually teaching resiliency. I did have to pivot over here. That's a skill set, being able to pivot in the moment and restructure a lesson that you have or how you're going to handle something or how we're managing life as parents. So I think we need to role model some of that to kids that,
Yes.
it's okay to pivot and have to, that's called problem solving in the moment because life is going to throw you curveballs. You
Yes.
can map it all out and it's not going to work like that. And if you're not
No.
prepared for some of those curveballs, you're going to be flattened. And I love what your teen guy said about, the masking. Look, we all have a mask in the sense of you've got a work mask and your family
Mhm.
mask. Not all of it is fake and disconnected, but it is that piece of, oh, this is the kind of employee I need to show up as. And oh, this is the kind of mom I have to be. And, this is the kind of friend I have to be instead of just being able to accept your flaws and accept imperfection and move forward and keep having connections and communicating. And, I think it's hard. We've kind of lost a little bit of that sense of community and people are not as connected together and everybody's so busy. Everybody's working hard and parents are both working and kids are taking AP classes, which was never really supposed to originally be the intent of these AP classes. And they're playing, competitive sports and maybe they're also coming to therapy and they also maybe have a job. I mean, people are really spread thin. So it makes it really hard to have these just sit down and have family dinner or, invite
Mm.
neighbors over or connect in those ways that really bring about community. And I think we need community back and we need to support and love each other as a community. And that's hard. We
Mhm.
see a lot of division right now, right, in the world. And so
Yeah.
it's very difficult. And these kids are pretty stressed out about what is happening. And there's a lot of social justice in the young minds, but they don't know what to do or where to put it. So I think, again, that community feel could help with some of that.
100%. Yeah, I love that a lot. And I think about the revelation of when I started being human as a
Yeah.
teacher and when I started being human with my own children. It did create connection. And it, like, in hindsight, blew me away. I could not believe the immense connection that was created when I became human, And it's hard to believe that it's possible when you're in the thick of it. And parents, it's really hard to take that super cape off, that superhero cape, because it is really incredible to think that your kids think you can do no wrong,
Yeah.
but they know at some age they realize you do wrong. And
They
when
do.
you don't acknowledge it, that superhero cape becomes a lead blanket and you
Yes.
guys just start distancing.
Yep, it becomes very disingenuous when we can never let down our guard and be a little bit vulnerable. And obviously, and I know you know this, there's
Yeah.
difference in oversharing. I don't mean that
Yeah.
we as parents should not be, our kids are not our therapists, they are not our spouse, they are not our friends. We don't need to overshare, but we can be real. We
Yes.
can apologize. We can
Mm.
tell them, hey, you know what? I'm really sorry I kind of snapped out at you. That was not you. I haven't eaten. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Or, I didn't sleep well last night. It is okay to show them that one, it's okay to apologize, and that two, you don't have to be perfect, and that there are reasons sometimes for our behaviors. And I think, like you
Mhm.
said, like just letting those guards down and genuinely connecting. Kids want to be heard. They want to know that you value what they think. And that doesn't mean that they get to run the show, but we still want
No.
to hear what they think and feel. It has value. And I think so much of that has been shut down in the guise of like, I need to make sure everything is going to go okay and that you get the grades you need and you get the college that you need and you have the life you need and this career path. And well, then we've taken the decision making away from them and
Oh,
we
yes.
want them to not trust their own instincts, which
Right.
is going to do you well in the grand scheme of life.
Right, right. 100%. That decision making, right?
Yeah.
We can't make the decisions for them. And when we do, it really just backfires
Yes.
completely. Yeah.
That we don't mean to, but it's
No.
going to harm the kid because then they don't know how to make decisions. And you
Right.
can't launch if you don't know how to make decisions.
Mm-mm.
And so, there is some of this failure to launch of like, I don't know how to do anything on my own because I was never allowed to do anything on my own. And it really stems from the place of like, I want to manage my anxiety as a parent, so I'm going to do
Mhm.
that by controlling you.
Yes.
That's not healthy for either one of us, you
Right.
know?
And it sends the message to our kids that we don't trust that they can make
Yes,
their own decision.
exactly. It actually inadvertently tells the kid, I don't think you're capable of
I don't
making
think
this
you're capable.
decision.
I
When
know.
when that isn't our message, the message is I'm anxious about this, so I'm going to make this decision to soothe my anxiety, but that is
Right.
not how that lands on your child.
No, no, the messages are missed so directly. Gail, I would love for you to share, like, what advice do you have for a kid who's feeling like their voice doesn't matter, that their parents are not listening, or that, they are overscheduled and they feel like there's so much resting on their shoulders? What is
Yeah.
some of the first things that you would recommend them do?
Well, first thing I would ask that teen to do is say, can you, and look, they are so overworked at school. I
Yeah.
really hate to give them any kind of like homework assignments, but I will say, like, can you journal a little bit about this? Because you're going to get more clear about what it is you need to say. We can clear out some of the clutter and don't go on side topics, kind of clear out like, what is it you
Mm,
really need to say to your parents? Journal it out a little bit and have a pretty clear idea. Then you ask your parents, basically like, hey, mom and dad, or whatever guardians are taking care of you, I have a pitch for you. I want to give you a pitch. And I'm going to ask you to sit down and I'm asking you to listen and not speak. If you need to have a tablet and write while I'm speaking, feel free. But I'm going to give you my pitch. And the pitch may be that I don't want to play this sport anymore. And here's why. Or
mm,
the pitch is that this is what I want to take in school. And like sometimes I've had kids advocate that they want to take a little higher hard
yep.
classes that parents are fearful you're going to fail. And the kid's like, no, I want to do this. So, write it out what you want. Ask your parents if they'll let you pitch it to them. Some kids will say to me, my parents will not listen. They won't be able to sit quietly on the couch. That is never going to happen. Well, try writing them a letter. Sometimes a written letter where you just get and say, look, I want you to read this and then I want us to talk. That way the parent
Mm,
gets a chance to process it without feeling
yeah.
like they have to have a certain reaction in front of the kid and then say, can we please come talk about it? If you really have parents that are just never going to hear that and never going to get it and never going to help the kid find their voice, then they're going to have to find that in other ways. Ideally, see if you can get a therapist or using the school system because there are supports in place in the school system between your school counselor, your social worker, your school psychologist that might be able to help you find that voice. In the meantime, if you really have a family situation where you're just going to be super controlled and you're not going to have a voice, then evidence has shown just having an outside adult doesn't have
Yeah.
to be a family member. I mean, hey, maybe it's an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, but if not, like, the school systems, they got some good systems in place. And so utilize the systems that you have because sometimes a parent maybe isn't going to listen to Johnny, but they'll listen to me. So
Yeah.
if you can find some other outside adult then to help them find their voice and start a path forward, then that's kind of the option too. But a lot of parents really will sit down and listen. You just have to say to them, I've done some thinking. I journaled it out. This is what I want to tell you. This is why I want to do this. So give them that pitch. The majority of your parents are going to listen to you. You may not get everything you're asking for, but
Right.
you'll kind of feel heard and listened to. And then it opens a dialogue. The other thing that I would add, and I would say this not just for the team, but for the parent, and I get it, everybody is so busy and so spread thin. But you know how many families I have that they never have family dinner? They don't have it. And I get you're not going to have it every night. The days of be home at 7 and sit down and have family dinner, like that ship has sailed. But you should be having some family dinners. And that isn't the time to say, what did you get on that test? How is your application going? That's the time to say, how are you? What's going on with you? How are you feeling about life? And listen, parents, you just got to listen to your kids sometime and not jump in and give them your thoughts and
Mm,
opinions. Down the road, I'm not saying you never do that. You are the parent, but you need to let your kids listen. So we need to have more family dinners, more family time, more family connections, family movie night, game night, whatever it is. But I really think for the kid who's really feeling unheard, start writing it out. Get a clear picture of what you want to say so that it's clear and you're not all over the map because you're going to lose the parent if it's all over
yeah.
the map. And then present it as a pitch. And if they won't hear it verbally, write it and send it to them.
That's great advice. I really enjoy that. If people are looking to find more about Project Safe or connect with you, where would you suggest they go?
Yes. So certainly we have a website, Project Safe, and then the number 4, the letter U leadersoftoday.com. That's our website. You meet all the team. You can see everything about us, and we have blog posts, but we're also on Instagram and we're also on Facebook. And again, it's Project Safe, all one word, the number 4, the letter U. So that's our Insta, that's our Facebook, and we put lots of tips out on our Instagram pages. I think they're connected, so it's probably both. So I would love for them to follow us on Instagram. You don't have to be here in Virginia where we're located. You don't have to come do therapy with us, but you'll get a lot of great tips and advice and tools just from going to our Instagram page and seeing the little things that we put out there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this time. It has been really, really great.
It's been great meeting you, Lorraine, too. And again, I love what you're doing to, helping these teen titans get strong and find their footing and their grounding. And I think what I'm hearing for a lot of us, and I've been doing a few of these podcasts, is we're really trying to help kids find resiliency. And I think that is so key. And I absolutely love what you're doing as well.
Thanks so much, Gayle. Are you ready to help the young people in your life unlock their inner strength and step confidently into leadership? The new workbook from Peers Not Fears, Your Voice Matters, Uncovering Your Unique Leadership. It's designed to help teens see the leader in themselves, step by step. It's not just a workbook. It's the first step towards a ripple effect that could change lives. Let's turn today's teens into tomorrow's titans. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit from this conversation. Together, we can support our teens in building healthy, positive relationships and become leaders of tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Lorraine Connell, and this is Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans.